When an avoidant starts seeing you as someone who truly matters, their nervous system often does not react with happiness or excitement. Instead, it reacts with stress and caution. To them, becoming deeply connected means the relationship is no longer simple or easy to leave behind. It begins to carry responsibility, emotional exposure, and the risk of losing the sense of control they have worked so hard to protect. This is why so many people misunderstand what is happening. They see distance and assume the feelings are disappearing, when in many cases that distance is actually the avoidant person's way of calming emotions that suddenly feel too powerful. Your value did not become smaller. In many situations, it became much greater than they know how to comfortably handle. Your presence wakes up attachment, emotional needs, vulnerability, and the fear of depending on someone all at the same time. For a person whose early experiences taught them that closeness can lead to pain, disappointment, or emotional pressure, those feelings can feel more like a warning than a source of comfort. Instead of naturally moving toward you, their first reaction is often to create space. They become quieter. They pull back. They limit emotional closeness because those behaviors once helped them feel protected. This is rarely a planned decision. It is usually an automatic response that developed over many years. Their mind learned that creating distance reduces emotional overload, so that pattern continues even when they genuinely care. Stay with this until the end, because the next part explains why their actions often seem to say the exact opposite of what they actually feel. Many people notice that avoidant individuals can seem relaxed, confident, and emotionally easygoing around people they do not have strong feelings for. That can be confusing. If they are capable of warmth with strangers or casual partners, why do they become distant with someone they genuinely value? The answer is that casual relationships usually do not activate their deepest attachment system. There is little pressure. There are fewer expectations. They do not feel that their independence is being challenged. But everything changes when someone becomes emotionally important. Your reliability reminds them that they have something meaningful to lose. Your kindness quietly invites deeper commitment. Your emotional openness makes them aware that one day they may need to offer the same level of vulnerability in return. Instead of creating peace, that awareness often creates internal pressure. They move closer because they enjoy the connection, then suddenly step back because the closeness becomes emotionally intense. This pattern can repeat many times. It is not always because they are unsure about you. More often, they are unsure about how to handle everything they are feeling. Many avoidant people describe healthy closeness as surprisingly overwhelming, even when there is no argument, no conflict, and no obvious problem. The bond itself feels powerful. It feels difficult to escape. Keep watching, because understanding this one difference changes the way you see almost every mixed signal they send. When they pull away, it is easy to believe your importance has faded, but very often the opposite is happening. Their withdrawal reflects the limits of their emotional capacity rather than the value they place on you. They are not always stepping back because they feel too little. Sometimes they step back because they are feeling far more than they know how to process. That does not excuse emotional distance or unhealthy relationship patterns, and it does not mean you should ignore your own needs. Healthy relationships still require communication, consistency, and mutual effort from both people. However, understanding this pattern helps explain why becoming special to an avoidant can actually make the relationship feel harder for them instead of easier. As things become more serious, many people assume the avoidant has suddenly changed their mind or lost attraction. In reality, attraction is often not the biggest challenge. Attachment is. Real emotional dependence can activate fears they have carried for years without fully realizing it. Their heart may want closeness while their nervous system pushes them toward distance. That internal conflict creates confusing behavior that leaves both people wondering what went wrong. The truth is that meaningful connection can feel both comforting and frightening at the same time. And unless those deeper patterns are recognized and healed, they may continue repeating the same cycle, even with someone they truly care about. If this insight changed the way you see avoidant behavior, keep listening, because the next lesson reveals another hidden pattern that most people completely miss. Attraction often feels exciting, light, and easy to enjoy. Attachment feels completely different. It feels lasting, deeply personal, and emotionally demanding. The moment a real emotional bond begins to grow, an avoidant person's nervous system may quietly start searching for possible danger. This usually does not happen because you did something wrong. It happens because deep closeness activates old protective patterns they learned long ago. That is why their behavior can seem so confusing. One day, they are warm, affectionate, engaged, and emotionally present. The next day, they become distant, quiet, or take much longer to reply. What looks like mixed signals from the outside is often an internal struggle between wanting love and feeling afraid of it at the very same time. Attachment means allowing another person to become important. It means showing up consistently, being emotionally dependable, and sharing life with someone else's feelings and needs. For a person who grew up believing that depending on others leads to disappointment, pressure, or emotional pain, that responsibility can feel incredibly heavy. So instead of moving closer, they often create space. Their hope is not necessarily to end the relationship, but to reduce the emotional intensity before it becomes too overwhelming. That is why you may suddenly hear phrases like, "I don't know what I want," or "I just need some space," right after moments of deep connection. Beneath those words is often a nervous system quietly saying, "Everything feels too intense, and I don't know how to stay close without feeling overwhelmed." Keep watching, because the next part explains why even your kindness can accidentally increase their fear instead of calming it. The healthier, calmer, and more emotionally consistent you become, the more clearly their avoidant patterns can stand out. Your stability gently reflects the closeness they struggle to accept. Even reassurance is not always enough to calm their fears. Explaining your intentions, offering endless patience, or asking for honest communication may seem helpful, but to someone overwhelmed by intimacy, those actions can sometimes make the relationship feel even more serious. Suddenly, everything feels more real, more permanent, more emotionally significant. Their response is often to slow everything down. They become quieter, they answer less, they spend more time alone. This distance is usually not meant to punish you. It is their attempt to quiet the internal alarm that closeness has triggered. Ironically, this conflict exists because they care. True indifference usually feels calm and effortless. Genuine attachment often feels emotionally activating until they learn healthier ways to regulate themselves inside close relationships. The connection they value the most can become the very connection they feel driven to escape, not because the relationship is unhealthy, but because it feels overwhelmingly real. Stay with this until the end, because understanding this difference can completely change how you interpret their silence. When an avoidant creates distance, it is easy to experience that space as rejection. Yet many times the distance is actually their attempt to protect the relationship rather than destroy it. They do not always step away because they want everything to end. They step back because remaining emotionally present while feeling internally overwhelmed becomes incredibly difficult. Closeness brings expectations, emotional responsibility, and vulnerability they may not yet believe they can handle. Rather than risk hurting you or completely losing themselves, they depend on distance as a way to regain emotional balance. In their mind, taking space feels safer than staying close while feeling emotionally overloaded. That is one reason many meaningful relationships are not fully ended. Instead, they remain somewhere in between. Not completely present, but not entirely gone either. For the partner waiting, this uncertainty is deeply painful. For the avoidant, it often feels like the only way to balance love with fear. Many return after some time apart because once their nervous system settles, the emotional connection feels manageable again. The bond never truly disappeared. It simply became quieter while they searched for emotional stability. This can create the impression that they only care when you become unavailable. In reality, your absence lowers emotional pressure while your constant availability can unintentionally increase it. None of this makes the pattern healthy or sustainable. It simply explains why logic, reassurance, or unlimited patience rarely solve the problem. You cannot talk someone out of an automatic nervous system response. A better question is not, why won't they choose me? Instead ask, what does emotional closeness cost them inside? For many avoidant people, the emotional price feels greater than they know how to carry. Sadly, many partners begin shrinking themselves in response. They become quieter, ask for less, hide their emotions, and convince themselves that needing nothing will finally make the avoidant stay. But distance is never the same as true intimacy. It is simply emotional self-protection. While it may delay conflict for a while, it also prevents the trust, safety, openness, and deep connection that lasting love depends on. Distance may feel protective in the moment, but over time, it slowly weakens intimacy, confidence, and emotional security. The greatest heartbreak is not only that they step away, it is that they have not yet learned how to remain close without feeling like they are losing themselves. And when you see them appearing relaxed, friendly, or emotionally available with other people while staying distant with you, it is completely understandable to question your own value. But their reaction is often revealing far more about their internal struggle than it ever reveals about your worth. If this insight helped you see avoidant behavior in a different light, keep listening, because the next part uncovers another hidden pattern that most people never recognize until it is too late. You slowly begin asking yourself difficult questions. Am I expecting too much? Am I not enough? Did someone else become more important? Those thoughts feel real because the emotional distance feels personal. But in many situations, the truth is very different. You became the person who reached a level of closeness their nervous system had never fully learned to handle. The situation often has far less to do with your value than it feels like in the moment. Avoidant people do not always appear warmer toward others because those people matter more. They often seem more relaxed because those relationships carry much less emotional weight. In lighter connections, there is little fear of becoming emotionally dependent, very little pressure to stay consistently available, and almost no deep responsibility to protect intimacy. Their nervous system remains calm because very little feels at risk. With you, everything changes. You matter. You notice the parts of them that most people never see. That emotional depth quietly awakens fears they are not yet prepared to manage. Without fully realizing it, they begin limiting their time, emotional energy, and availability. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they are trying to protect themselves from feeling emotionally flooded. Stay with this until the end, because the next part explains one of the most misunderstood behaviors in avoidant attachment. That is why they may seem cheerful, attentive, and completely at ease with someone new, while becoming hesitant, quieter, or emotionally distant with the person who truly understands them. New relationships still feel light. They have not yet activated deep attachment or the responsibilities that come with it, but genuine emotional closeness does exactly that, and this is often where fear quietly begins. It is one of the hardest parts of loving an avoidant person. The more meaningful you become, the less emotional access you sometimes seem to have. As painful as that feels, it is usually not a reflection of your worth. It reflects their struggle to stay emotionally balanced inside relationships that truly matter. Without noticing it, they often move toward connections that require very little emotional investment, while stepping back from the ones that ask for honesty, vulnerability, and emotional presence. To explain this pattern, they may tell themselves simple stories like, "The timing isn't right," "I'm just stressed," "I value my independence," or "This is just how I am." Those explanations feel easier than facing the deeper reality that closeness creates anxiety instead of comfort. Keep watching, because once you understand this pattern, many confusing moments suddenly begin making much more sense. For the person on the other side, this cycle becomes emotionally exhausting. You wait longer than you should, you ask for less than you need, you accept inconsistent effort while convincing yourself that enough patience will eventually make everything better. But patience alone cannot heal avoidant patterns. Sometimes it simply gives those patterns more room to continue. The more you adjust yourself to emotional distance, the more normal that distance begins to feel. While the avoidant experiences less pressure, the relationship slowly loses its balance. Mutual effort fades. emotional safety weakens. Understanding this is not about blaming them or judging their past. It is about refusing to carry responsibility for something that was never yours to fix. They did not become careful because you mattered less. In many cases, they became careful because you mattered far more than they knew how to handle. Many people believe that if they explain themselves more gently, love more carefully, or offer endless reassurance, the avoidant will finally feel secure. Sadly, that often creates the opposite result. What you experience as comfort can feel like pressure to someone who connects closeness with losing independence. When you ask for consistency or emotional openness, they may not hear, "I want us to feel closer." Instead, their nervous system hears, "Soon I will be expected to give more than I know how to sustain." Their automatic response is to step back, not because they want to punish you, but because they are trying to recover a sense of inner freedom. This is why chasing almost never creates the closeness you are hoping for. Every attempt to close the emotional gap can unintentionally strengthen their fear that intimacy eventually becomes overwhelming. Even kind messages or thoughtful check-ins may feel intrusive when they are already emotionally overloaded. Over time, you may notice yourself carefully choosing every word, watching your tone, and waiting for the perfect moment to speak, hoping you will not trigger another withdrawal. But a relationship that requires you to constantly silence your own emotional needs is not healthy intimacy. It becomes emotional self-sacrifice. Avoidant people do not need others to care less about them. They need to learn how to feel emotionally safe while remaining close to someone they love. Until that happens, reassurance alone cannot reach the deeper fear driving their behavior. The real turning point begins when you stop trying to manage their emotional world and start becoming grounded in your own. When you stop chasing, the feeling of pursuit disappears. Calmness often communicates safety far more effectively than repeated explanations ever could. It quietly shows that your emotional stability no longer depends on their reactions. For many avoidant people, this naturally lowers the pressure. You are no longer trying to pull them towards something they are not ready to maintain. You are simply showing up as yourself without demanding immediate change. That does not guarantee they will move closer, but it protects your peace, your confidence, and your emotional clarity. Ironically, it is often the first time they stop experiencing you as another source of pressure. And when an avoidant forms a truly meaningful connection, that bond rarely disappears simply because they created distance. They may seem detached on the outside, but meaningful relationships often leave a lasting emotional mark. Casual connections built only on convenience usually fade. What remains is the memory of someone who understood them without trying to control them, accepted them without demanding perfection, and offered emotional safety without taking away their freedom. Those experiences often stay with them much longer than they ever admit. That is one reason some avoidant people unexpectedly return months or even years later. If this changed the way you see avoidant behavior, stay with the next part, because one final insight explains why some connections continue living quietly beneath the surface long after the silence begins. They may not come back with complete self-awareness, deep apologies, or lasting emotional growth. More often, they return with curiosity, quiet nostalgia, or a simple desire to reconnect with someone who once mattered deeply. As time passes, the emotional intensity that once overwhelmed them begins to fade. The immediate pressure of closeness becomes less intense, but the memory of the connection often remains. From their point of view, the relationship now feels safer because they are no longer facing the emotional demands that originally activated their defenses. For the other person, this return can feel confusing, especially after putting so much effort into healing and moving forward. It may even seem selfish or unexpected. Yet from the avoidant perspective, they are revisiting a bond that once carried deep meaning, only now it feels emotionally easier to approach. The important thing to remember is this: missing someone is not the same as being ready to love them in a healthier way. Without real self-awareness and intentional personal growth, avoidant patterns usually repeat themselves. They reconnect, enjoy the comfort of familiarity, and then slowly pull away again as soon as emotional closeness begins to deepen. This is why so many people mistake a return for genuine transformation. Keep watching because the next part reveals why coming back and truly changing are often two very different things. It is easy to believe that time apart completely changed an avoidant person, that the silence gave them wisdom, emotional maturity, or a brand new perspective. Sometimes that does happen. But just as often, the distance simply gave their nervous system enough room to settle down. The relationship feels safer again because it exists with emotional space, not because the deeper attachment pattern has truly changed. Understanding this can protect you from reopening old wounds based only on hope. Someone remembering you with warmth is not the same as being emotionally prepared to build a healthy relationship with you. Lasting intimacy requires steady effort, emotional consistency, honest communication, and mutual responsibility. Being unforgettable may feel validating, but memories alone cannot create the safety, stability, and commitment that lasting love needs. An avoidant person may think about you for years, yet your healing should never depend on whether they eventually return. The biggest transformation begins when you stop measuring your worth through another person's ability to choose you. Instead of waiting for validation from someone still learning how to stay emotionally present, you slowly reconnect with yourself. This is not emotional distance or pretending not to care. It is healthy self-alignment, and ironically, this is often the moment the entire dynamic quietly begins to shift. Avoidant people are highly sensitive to emotional pressure, but they also notice emotional independence. When you stop chasing, over-explaining, or trying to earn your place in their life, the invisible pressure they once associated with closeness begins to disappear. You are no longer asking them to carry your emotional stability, and that naturally feels less overwhelming to them. Not because you became cold or manipulative, but because you became emotionally grounded. You stop searching for constant reassurance. You stop sacrificing your own needs simply to keep the relationship alive. You remain open without abandoning yourself. You stay present without becoming emotionally dependent. You no longer feel the need to prove your value because you quietly understand it. That calm confidence often creates respect, even if it does not immediately change their actions. Many people misunderstand what real emotional strength looks like. Strength is not convincing someone to come back. Strength is remaining whole, whether they return or not. Avoidant people may resist emotional urgency, but they often recognize emotional stability. They notice when someone has stopped building their entire world around the relationship. That shift can create awareness, even if it does not instantly lead to commitment. Stay with this until the end, because the final insight may completely change how you see your own healing. Even if they never move closer again, something far more valuable has already happened. You have returned to yourself. The relationship no longer defines who you are. You are no longer trapped between endless hope and repeated disappointment. You have reclaimed your emotional center. If they eventually come back, they meet someone standing beside them as an equal, not someone still waiting to be chosen. And if they never return, you have not lost yourself in the process. The moment you stop living for another person's decision is the moment you stop disappearing inside the relationship. That quiet emotional presence leaves a lasting impression, whether an avoidant is ready to embrace it or not. When an avoidant suddenly becomes silent, it is rarely because every feeling has disappeared overnight. More often, they are trying to manage emotional pressure they do not yet know how to release. Silence is one of the oldest coping strategies they have. When emotions become too intense for their nervous system, stepping back feels much safer than staying emotionally exposed. Even simple conversations can feel filled with pressure. A small question may require honesty they are not ready to express. A vulnerable discussion may feel like an unspoken promise they fear they cannot keep. Even moments filled with love can awaken fears of losing themselves inside the relationship. In those moments, silence feels like the safest place they know. For the person experiencing that silence, it often feels painful, confusing, and deeply personal. It is easy to mistake it for rejection or indifference. Yet inside, many avoidant people experience silence as an attempt to protect the connection while trying not to become emotionally overwhelmed. It gives them time to process feelings they struggle to understand and creates temporary distance from vulnerability that feels too intense to face. Ironically, their silence often communicates more than their words ever could. Beneath the quiet often lives attachment, anxiety, fear, and an ongoing internal struggle. Learning not to immediately take every withdrawal personally helps break the exhausting cycle of chasing, over-explaining, and increasing emotional pressure. If this perspective helped you understand avoidant behavior more clearly, keep listening, because the next insight reveals what their silence is often trying to say without ever speaking a single word.